This is a critical error, a critical mistake that PlayStation fanboys made. And I would hope that those who are looking forward to Nintendo's new console not ever be bogged down or bothered with this. This is a domain and a realm for Nvidia, Intel, and AMD folk to battle and punch it out. I mean, we literally sit there, right? Let me show you some examples. Like, we have YouTube channels, forums, websites and stuff dedicated to sitting down to crunch power numbers, to look at, all kinds of metrics, DLSS, FSR, 4K, this CPU, that GPU. Sometimes they even do RAM performance and even monitor performance on channels like Hardware Unboxed, Gamers Nexus. Let me show you how pedantic this thing gets. I mean, and this is all consumer based, by the way, because again, the hardware concept of the PC is very different. Gamers Nexus is very, very fond of doing cases. They would do reviews on a freaking box that your computer is going to sit in. Yes, they do case reviews all the time. Look at this video right here, 4 months ago. Best cases of 2024, $80 to $800, airflow, cable management, thermal leaders. This is normal. Like, if I want to find a case, like, all right, man, I want to do a new build. This is what I come do. And I already see that there is a Nintendo-centric YouTuber that is already going on the comment of, take a listen here.
About the Nintendo Switch 2 and its power. You see, for years.
Oh, no, don't do it. In fact, I think Nintendo is purposefully not even talking too much about the whole power concept, because it's a critical error that the moment you start it, it doesn't end. It's what's called a power fantasy. It's one that cannot be achieved by the architecture of a console. So let us not even dare try to worry or engage in this, because what this is going to do is this is going to create all kinds of holes that people are going to want to take advantage of in making what I think is light work of a console that we should probably be paying more attention to other aspects compared to performance. Are y'all feeling me? Because this is not the direction to go. I strongly advise against this. Why? The Nintendo Switch 2, in my opinion, I've never taken a Nintendo Switch and thought about it as some kind of a power whatever. And if it's about if it's about sauce, in terms of hardware and all that stuff, please, before somebody comes out and says something, absolutely irrelevant, we're rocking cores out here. Okay? We're rocking, GPU juice out here. Okay? I'm cranking this video out on this machine that's probably a few Nintendo Switches put together and a few Nintendo Switch 2s. I'm not interested in any kind of power fantasy that anybody wants to engage in, because it's basically going to be the downfall of that hardware. What should be focused on for Nintendo is fun games, value proposition, and how gamers and the market interacts with it. Because you only get those games that are Nintendo games on the Nintendo hardware at the moment. There's no need. PlayStation delved into this big mistake because third-party games are prevalent on their platform, but they ended up clowning themselves because that hardware is not as powerful as what PC can do in a heartbeat. Because one PC that may be rocking underpowered hardware can become a PC that is overpowered overnight or in the next 15 minutes with the right components actually plays very well.
We've been speculating on what the capabilities of the Nintendo Switch 2 are, and we're not the only ones. In fact, Digital Foundry came out at one point and said this about the Nintendo Switch 2.
Yeah, I don't buy this concept that it's going to be more powerful than a Steam Deck or even, close to Series S. It's just not going to happen.
And look, as we sit here today and now we actually see games running on the system, they are seemingly dead wrong about this idea that the Nintendo Switch 2 isn't as powerful as a PS4 or a Steam Deck, or seemingly just don't fundamentally get that they were kind of underselling what the Nintendo Switch 2 is capable of. And
in all fairness, this is Digital Foundry. They're the ones that overshot with the PS5 Pro. And Richard Ledbetter said, oh, it's going to be, probably as powerful as an underclocked 4070 to send folk like, some of the PlayStation fanboys, I'm not going to mention any names today, running all the way down a cliff with their credibility. And Richard Ledbetter, could say it was my opinion. So again, I wouldn't take that. This is no. Sir, Nintendo Prime, no, don't even bother with this conversation anymore. I'm one of the heavy critics of Nintendo coming out the window. I'm just trying to help you all out here because this is not the fight that anybody should be bothering about. Does that make sense?
the problem is, as we get to today, is they're still underselling it for really no reason anymore when we actually have now games to actually compare.
Hold on. There's a reason these companies do what I think are interesting reveals that are not necessarily exposing everything to the consumer until it finally launches. And I have to say, take from the playbook of PlayStation 5. The PlayStation 5 reveal, PlayStation 5 Pro reveal, right? It was also provided with games and descriptions and depictions of what the technical, aspects of the game would look like. In fact, Mark Cerny went deep into some of the conversations. Let me show you guys here. Sorry, that was the audio you heard from the PlayStation technical presentation hosted by Mark Cerny 7 months ago, last year, right? He was showing things in real time and so on and so forth. But that that whole presentation got people running wild and saying things that bro had to eventually later come out, which is the video that is sitting right here on my top right of my screen, to eventually start correcting things and posting and talking, oh, well, this is the architecture. It seemed like some people have already gone ahead to oversell it and called it flopflation. Bro could have basically allowed for us to assess by ourselves, but because they had to push units, there had to be a little bit of flair in the marketing that this is going to provide you these things. But then when they saw that the fandom had gone out of hand, bro decided that, oh, hold on, let's get some scientific and more empirical outlook on this hardware. This is why I'm making this video and saying to their Nintendo Prime, sir, forget this piece of the conversation. Does that make sense? You don't want to dabble into this. I don't think anyone is bothering with that. Okay? I'm not even making any conclusions about the Series S and the Nintendo Switch. I'm not even bothered. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't even matter. Because the Nintendo Switch, I think that the best it can do, right, is to possibly maybe edge out the Series S, which is 5 years older than it. Woohoo. But there's a bigger play here. That if this hardware piece comes in and game developers start optimizing their games for it, it's Pandora's box and a win for Xbox regardless.
And I want to make sure I shout out a fellow content creator, someone who's come on our podcast several times in Super Metal Dave 64, because he made a video about this, about the graphics of the Nintendo Switch 2, and almost all of the information in this video came from his video. He's much more technically inclined and can get into things like how lighting systems can be kind of different and how like screen space reflections can sometimes, in some cases.
Bro, this is a Nintendo console. Let's not do this. No. Oh no. Screen space reflections. That is the talk of the that's what we should be talking. You know what I mean? So when I say screen space reflections, I should be like, okay, yeah, what does that mean? I should be scratching my head. But screen space reflections on a Nintendo Switch? I'm going to be worried about that? No. Maybe the most we can even cite is FPS. And that's, I think, all we're allowed. In my opinion, anyways. You know what I mean? Like, that's it. I'm not expecting the Switch to blow my socks off. What have we not seen yet? The only thing I haven't seen, ladies and gentlemen, is multi-frame generation. And I refuse to give, NVIDIA anything for that because it's just, Fugazi frames. It's cool, but it's Fugazi frames. It's not like, you know what I mean? It's like plant meat. Hey, if you're a vegan out there, I'm just saying. Okay, I'm not taking a stab. You know what? Let me keep up with my video because I'm about to get into trouble.
Actually look better than ray tracing does, despite being an older technology that's easier to run. It really just depends on the game and the situation things are being used in. And that's all good and dandy, but I want to break this down into a bit more layman's terms for you guys. So yes, you absolutely should go watch his video for the deep tech dive on this, but we're going to address the fact that Digital Foundry is underselling the Nintendo Switch 2 and talk about why the Nintendo Switch 2 is actually seemingly significantly more powerful than a PlayStation 4 and much more in line with something like an Xbox Series S with additional features.
Okay. So what you're saying is that the Nintendo Switch is more powerful than the PS4. It's a compliment if the Nintendo Switch 2 is even as powerful as a PS4, in my mind. I have never really seen why developers ran away from the PS4 so fast. I thought that was a waste, in my opinion. But I think here's the problem. A lot of, AMD, NVIDIA, and all these others want to, broadcast their features, right? AMD is happy if they even make their games relegated to the new consoles. NVIDIA is happy if they, put some sauce in their PC versions of their games so they can say, oh, look at that cool thing. And these developers are basically chasing technology now. Their games have basically become marketing platforms for AMD and NVIDIA and Intel too, with XeSS, that they've basically abandoned what is about. Many more games I think would have been really successful if they had just continued making games for the PS4 and the PS5 as a normal transition. I strongly believe that if they had scaled their games accordingly, where the games can run on these hardware pieces, they would have been so much better off. I mean, think about a game like Godfall. The game was a PS5 exclusive. It was a Epic Games exclusive. Do you want to tell me that with the weight of the PS4 audience, that game would not have been able to shift enough copies to keep those developers afloat?
So, before we dive in, I want to remind you we are giving away a Nintendo Switch 2. So why don't you go ahead. I do really respect the people over at Digital Foundry. I think they do excellent work, and their graphics comparison videos contain so many fact-based information. It's wonderful, but the deeper you get into a generation like PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X's generation, now that we're in like year 4/5 of all of that, and obviously we're beginning year 1 of Switch 2, but before that, it's kind of like, hey, they got really, really big, and they started putting their opinions attached to a lot of things.
Digital Foundry's been big for a minute, though. I mean, let's not do that. I would disagree with them. Everybody can. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'm trying to sit here and think, should I just continue with this video? Should I just say, you know what? Let's just pretend like this, this video never happened and Nintendo Prime didn't make this video, because even if he's right, does that make sense? This is Pandora's box. If he's correct, the 60 series come out, right? If he's correct, the freaking AMD 10 series comes out, and they start getting cheaper and cheaper. And the Nintendo Switch, which looks like a $400 and something PC, people start building $400 PCs that have 40 series technology and 30 series technology that's better than the Nintendo. And then again, the whole thing collapses all over again. The Nintendo Switch can't get an upgrade, except maybe a mid-gen refresh. That's probably going to be minimal gains. That's not it. It's the cycle that PlayStation 5 actually basically put itself through that made a joke out of the console. Wow. One of my audience members told me that I should be very careful the way I criticize Nintendo. I'm like, see, if I levy critique on Nintendo based on data points and stuff, that's great. But this to me is way more dangerous because this sets up Nintendo for a very huge blowback when it comes down to it.
And right now, since they have not yet gone hands-on with Switch 2 themselves, they have not seen these games in person, they are delivering more opinions rather than facts. And
They did. One of their guys did. I saw it on Twitter the other day. Well, this video is 3 days old. Maybe he wasn't aware of this. Okay. I'm gonna call it good here. I'm gonna say, this video never happened. No Nintendo fan is actually over here talking about the, performance. It's just me. I'm just seeing things because I saw another guy on Twitter, but I'm gonna ignore him too and say no, no, this is a distraction. Let's not do it because I don't necessarily think it really does align with Nintendo's. And I will criticize Nintendo. Don't get me wrong, but I gotta stop the fans and say, if I can, and put my opinion here and say, nah, don't do this. There are other things to focus on that would probably better serve you, your community, and those who are looking forward to Nintendo as a whole. My opinion. Thanks for watching the video. Talk to me in the comment section. Peace out.